Good evening and welcome to the Death Cafe. If you're here for the first time or you've been here before, it's so lovely to have you here. As if you've been here before, you recognize that the conversations are never the same, but the objective is to have a safe place to have the conversation. So as you come on to the Death Cafe, do me a favor and let me know where you're from, what place in the country or the world. Sometimes we have people visiting from all over the world. So I'm very excited to meet you. I'm broadcasting tonight from Nevada City, California. And it's a beautiful place in Northern California at the base of the Sierra Mountains. And it's very, very beautiful. So where are you from? And I will look forward to connecting with you as you join us. In the meantime, hi, Kathy. Welcome from Oceanside. Lovely to have you here tonight. In the meantime, as you start to gather, find yourself a comfortable place. Pour yourself a cuppa. I have my golden milk here, and make yourself comfortable. And I will look forward in just a couple minutes to have the conversation with you. Hi, Sarah. Welcome from Fullerton, California. It's lovely to have you here. And I do know, precious Sarah, and my heart is with you and my arms are wrapped around you. And it's so sweet that you're here tonight. So thank you. We will give people another minute or two to kind of come on and join us this evening and settle yourself in. And tonight's all about you. I'm here to offer loving support, share resources, kind of inspire the conversation. So while we're waiting to get started, take a moment to think of what brought you here tonight and what's on your mind and what would be helpful for you this evening. And that would be lovely. Hi, Jim. Welcome. I think Jim's from Southern California. I recognize Jim. It's lovely to have you here. So welcome. So Jim, you're joining us. Grab yourself a cuppa, find yourself a comfortable place to be, and we'll start the conversation really soon. Really, really soon. We'll let people kind of come in over the next few minutes. And why don't we take a minute to come together as a community and ground? So if you're feeling it's the right space for you, go ahead and allow your eyelids to close and take a moment to connect with your breath. Gently and deliberately direct your awareness to your breath and body sensations. You start at your feet, scan up through your feet, the center of your body, the back of your head, and just use your breath to release any tension. Use your breath to go deeper within. Use your breath to find the space within you that's connected to the still, quiet place, beneath the chatter of the voice. Continue to connect with the sensory flow. Pay attention to any lightning, any sound, temperature, or texture. Create a gentle and accepting, non-judgmental, and grateful atmosphere within yourself. May you stay open to the roots of the unexamined assumptions and beliefs, remaining open to possibilities. Take one more moment for yourself to drop in, and when you feel ready, go ahead and allow your eyelids to open and come back together. I see Jim, you're in Hawaii. Aloha and welcome. Well, how many of you is the first time at a death cafe? If you've been here before, I'm just going to take a moment to share what a death cafe is, because I think it's a loving reminder of what our time is tonight going to be like. So the phrase death cafe is kind of interesting. It's both a movement and it's an individual gathering like we're having today that occurred as part of the movement. The movement began in Switzerland when Bernard Kretz held his first Café Mortel in 2004. Later, a British web designer, John Underwood, was inspired to host a Death Cafe gathering in his home in London in September of 2011. I've had the honor of hosting death cafes myself for about the last 8 years, and it's been an incredible experience. No cafe is the same. So just before I signed on, did the research, and today there's over 12,565 death cafes in 78 countries. Believe it or not, that increased by 500 cafes in 3 countries in just a month. It's quite incredible. The Death Cafe events are always offered on a nonprofit basis in an accessible, respectful, and confidential space. There's no intention whatsoever of leading people to say any conclusions, sell any products, demand any course of action. And if we were meeting live, we'd have some tea and chocolate. So I hope maybe you can sneak yourself something to drink and maybe a little treat if that feels right to you. I want to share the overall objective of the Death Cafe gatherings. It really was designed to increase awareness of death with a view of helping people make the most out of their finite lives. That when we accept the finiteness of our life, it allows us to live more fully. We soon start discarding external roles and petty concerns that really are essentially don't bring meaning to our life. I always say death inspires life, thus allowing the space and incentive to focus on what truly is important to you, what truly is meaningful to you. We know this life ends. How do you want to live it? And the more we feel safe and comfortable and touch upon death, the more we'll find that meaning in our life. People choose to be part of the Death Cafe gathering for many different reasons, but it's worth noting that the Death Cafe movement has arisen spontaneously and really appears to meet a felt need and demonstrate that at least some people in our society and elsewhere are willing and able to talk about death-related subjects. The Death Cafe is not a grief support group or a lecture or educational session or avenues promoting business or cause. However, we do feel supported after a Death Cafe because we hear each other and we see the connections that we all have because we're all going to die. We're all going to walk that road. We're all going to take that path. So that's something as a human we have in common. Communications about end-of-life issues is the key to understanding and making our decisions that we want at the end of life and or supporting loved ones. So the conversation is quite important to that. We cannot magically make death disappear from our lives, nor can we completely erase the sadness and other forms of distress associated with death-related issues. However, we can talk about it. We can talk about death. We can share our insights and attitudes and learn from each other and strive together to cope more effectively with dying, death, and bereavement. I hope that's helpful to give you an introduction, and welcome to all of you that have joined since I was kind of doing the introduction. And I think we have people in Browns Valley and Hawaii, Nevada City, another person from Nevada City, Orange County. Welcome. And that's another magical thing about doing Death Cafe on a live event is we can join in from all over the country. So as I stated, the Death Cafe is for you. And I want to know what's on your mind. What brought you to the Death Cafe? What would bring you the most comfort this evening? What would you like to discuss? And welcome, Susan from Maryland, because I know there's a whole bunch of other things you can do besides be at a Death Cafe. So what brought you here this evening? Go ahead and just chat it in the chat box, and I'm seeing the stream, which is lovely. Sadly, I can't see you. We have another Zoom platform, Death Cafe, once a month, and if you want to have a touch more intimate interaction, that's a great place to go. And we're trying to figure out how to make this live also into a Zoom so we can see each other. But in the meantime, what brought you to the cafe? What would you like to discuss? What would ease your journey right now? Something brought you here. While you're processing a little bit, I always have things on my mind about death and dying that strike me either through work with clients. And I apologize. I just realized I didn't introduce myself. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Dearheart. You can call me Dr. Dearheart, Andrea, or Dearheart. I answer to all of those. And I've had the honor for the last 35 years of supporting people before, during, and after death. I started 35 years ago as a volunteer at a hospice, and I was inspired by my fear. I was very fearful of death. Nobody talked about death. People were dying in my family, and it grew scary. So I took the plunge and started to volunteer at a hospice, and it changed my life. From there, I became a hospice social worker and loved that work. And I left hospice in the mid-90s and started the foundation of the Heartway, which is a nonprofit that I started, the Heartway, Embracing Life, Honoring Death. And the Heartway provides advocacy, counseling, end-of-life care like death doula care or end-of-life practitioner care, as well as educational programs and ministry. And the intention of starting the Heartway was just that, to bring the heart in. As I started to shift from hospice, I left because hospice started to do more work with insurance companies and being guided by the insurance company regulations. And when I was told I can only have 45 minutes and I had to see 11 patients in a day, I just couldn't do that. I felt like I was going to say, could you hurry up and die? It takes time. It takes tears. It takes heart. And that was the foundation of my work at the Heartway. So I've had a vast depth and breadth of working with people before, during, and after death. And I wanted to do the Death Cafe because it absolutely is a real open platform to have these conversations. So I wanted you to have a safe place where you could come and talk about death and dying and concerns. So that's a touch about what brought me here to you. I want to know what brought you here. So Jim, you share your friend is in her late 90s and is declining. She's also a favorite aunt. Lovely. Lovely that it's a special person in your life. Can you share more about the experience of her declining? Is there something about that you want to talk about? And my heart is with you and your aunt. So let me know, Jim, a little bit more about that experience for you and what would support you. Susan, you shared to desensitize my fear of death, to come to terms with death and enjoy life. That was one of the things that brought you here tonight, to explore fear of death. And fear of death is a huge topic, and one that I actually wrote my doctorate dissertation on, denial of death, as well as the fear of death. And it's a huge issue, especially in Western culture, because there isn't too many, up until recently, platforms for exploring our fear. I just want you to know it is absolutely natural for all of us to fear death. Our egoic mind or consciousness mind, and I don't mean that in being egotistic, just the consciousness, the level of consciousness that you and I are having a conversation with, does everything it can to avoid being annihilated. That's partly where our fear comes from. We can't imagine not existing. Think about that for a minute. What would that be like? It's so hard to perceive. And this is partly where Eastern strategies, philosophies, and practices come in. Many of them practice dying, especially the Tibetans, so that when death comes, they're prepared. They're not as much in fear. They've had time to face it in some perspective, and they're not as fearful. So there are many ways to start working through our fears of death. And I'm going to share, there's many things. I don't want to take up too much time, but I want to share one of my absolutely favorite ways of working with our fear of death. First of all, Susan, one of them is coming here. So I commend you and bow to your courage to have the conversation. And that was my very first step 35 years ago when I volunteered, was to start to have the conversation around death. We were born and we signed a contract that this life would end one day. But then we started living and we forgot that contract. And then death grew into this scary place for many of us. Well, there are many tools. The one that I have found the most helpful personally and professionally is the practice of Yoga Nidra graceful transitions. Yoga Nidra graceful transition is a process of conscious relaxation, a practice to help us create the world we want to live in. I'm just in the middle of teaching the course right now during the day. You can look up on our website or Amazon Yoga Nidra Graceful Transitions and get a little bit more information, as well as a link to be able to listen to the practice. I also do a once a month practice free to the community, and you can find that information on the website as well. But basically, during Yoga Nidra, your body is relaxed, your mind is awake, and your body is asleep. And you start to learn how to transcend different layers of consciousness that allow us to stay connected to our true nature. And our true nature is not afraid of dying. Our true nature might be called our unconscious. It might be called the divine essence. It might be called psyche. It might be called soul. And in many traditions, even Western religions, this is the space that lives on. This is the space, the place, the energy within us that often lives on, but doesn't fear death. It's that ego mind that fears it. And there are absolutely ways of transcending that. Yoga Nidra would be one. Meditation in many traditions is also the practice of dying. Because in meditation, we transcend this world, this earthly world. Yoga Nidra is about creating the world we want to live in. There's a place in Yoga Nidra where we set our intention for creation. It's called the Sankalpa. And in that Sankalpa, we start to visualize ourselves pain-free. We start to visualize ourselves leaving our body without fear or discomfort. We start to visualize ourselves in the space beyond, whatever that means and gets created for us. Many traditions around the world practice these type of techniques to be connected with a place within us that exists beyond this life. Another way of saying it too is transcending into our heart and soul, where the fear of death doesn't exist. The fear, again, is in our body. And I've been so delighted and honored to work with many clients and have seen the transformational nature of Yoga Nidra, freeing them from the bondage of the fear, allowing themselves to be present all throughout the process towards the end of life. I hope that's helpful a little bit, Susan. If you have more inquiries, please feel free to write some more comments, or you're welcome to connect me. You can connect with me through the website. But it is a process. It is achievable. I'm kind of proof in the pudding because I started this work terrorized of death, just terrorized to where I couldn't live because I was so scared. And little by little, and through my work, with my first patient dying in my arms, I started to get a new perspective. I started to evolve in a different vision of this life and death. And the fear went away. The fear went away. I have moments. I want to always be honest with you. But I always know I'm going to be okay. And these practices have helped me tremendously, tremendously. So I hope that was helpful. Kathy, you're sharing you're returning to volunteer with hospice. Wonderful, this weekend after 14 months. Feeling a little nervous, but I've missed serving tremendously. How beautiful. And yeah, I feel nervous every time I face a client. You know, we're stepping into the unknown. And isn't that what death is? Stepping into the unknown. We've never been very good about that. We want to know, right? There's a part of it that wants to know, but there's so many things that are unknowable. I want to ask you a question. Why do we assume the unknown is scary or bad or hurtful or harmful? Why don't we imagine that the unknown is exciting, blissful, adventuresome, something even better than what we know? It's an interesting perspective to process. So we have a little conditioning on what we think the unknown is. And it is scary for our mind to step into the unknown. There's a whole lot of adventures to experience them. And I think our nervousness as we approach these things is real and also can be a great outlet in awareness. We have that fight or flight instinct, and it's there. It's there for a reason. And bless your heart, Kathy, for volunteering. You'll never know how your presence affects people. I do have a little secret to share. It's really about love. It's really about love and compassion. I'm writing an end-of-life practitioner training program that'll be released in September. I'm so excited about bringing my 35 years of experience in mythology and depth psychology, which is my doctorate work, into our understanding and ways of creating an integrative approach to end-of-life care, bringing the Western medical model of care and expanding it into the areas of knowledge that come from Eastern tradition, as well as our heart and our soul and Yoga Nidra and practices of death doula. And there's a nervousness about creating this work. And I know that it's inspiring. It's inspiring, this process. And I'll be talking about mythology and ethics and the legal aspects and the clinical practices, living internships, lots of technical detail, as well as spiritual, as well as medical. And that's all great, and it'll be so helpful. But it really boils down to how we can hold sacred space for each other, how we can be present for each other without our judgments and our assumptions and our projections. How can we really see another? Because isn't it when you're seen, you feel loved and cared for? Isn't it when you feel seen and held that our fears often just melt away? So, Kathy, as you step out to volunteer, just open your heart. Before I step into any client session, any Death Cafe, any workshop, any training, I pause and do some internal mantras, just reminders and openness. And mostly the message that I share with myself is to create an opening, to almost create an empty tabula rasa so that I can receive, to put aside my notions, my judgments, my projections the best that I can, to see what shows up in the room. In other words, I bring as much as I can to my technique of becoming present, not worrying about what I have to do, what I've done, what's on my plate, what paper I have to write, what I have to finish, but learning how to truly be present for those that I'm serving. I think that's the greatest healing balm. Yeah. I hope that's helpful, Kathy. I'll be thinking of you. And again, I bow to you for the beautiful work that you're doing. So, Jim, you were saying also your 98-year-old aunt is declining. And my heart is with you. And we're all going to go there. How do we want to show up for those that are declining? How do we want someone to show up for us? One of the things I will say, probably in the first class of this training program, is we have to be able to see ourselves in that deathbed. We have to be able to see ourselves completely, not just young and robust, see ourselves aging, see ourselves declining. And what's that experience like? Not necessarily a bad one. It's the reality of this life. There's something to learn and gain in it. And yeah, there is suffering. There is suffering. But how do we want to love? Yeah. Jim, your statement reminds me of my former husband that died. You said, "You're not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there," is all. And that's exactly what he said to me over and over again. And that's okay. You get to do this how you want. I'm a little opposite of you, Jim, to tell you the truth. I want to be there. I've spent my whole life supporting, hopefully nurturing, learning, growing, and I don't want to miss anything. I think it's an amazing time of life, just like birthing. We spent so much time and energy on birthing and not so much understanding dying. It's kind of interesting, as dying could be a birth into something else. So how do you want to die? That's the most important question. And there's so many means to support you in that. Sarah shares her grandma just passed away Thursday. My heart is so with you. It was an honor to work a little bit by your side. Before she transitioned, she was having terminal agitation. So our last interaction with her was that she was confused and upset. Do I know more about terminal agitation? Yeah, I know a little bit about terminal agitation. I've witnessed it in most clients and loved ones that have died. We all will have something called terminal agitation. I want to share with you what that is and what it is not, just in case that's helpful for you. Terminal agitation is a part of the dying process. It often comes into play the last few days of our life. There is all kinds of biological, physiological, emotional, existential processes that are happening at the end of life to us all. We, each of us, uniquely and also connectively, will go through various processes that are similar, but we will go through them a little differently. And I want to share with you what I've observed. In fact, my former husband that I was sharing with you had a lot of terminal agitation the last 20 hours, 30 hours of his life. And he had enough medication, the morphine and Ativan didn't touch it, Sarah, and it didn't touch it. And terminal agitation often shows up as a physical pain because sometimes the loved one will be moaning and agitated and fidgety and can't lie still. And I had him sitting and lying and rubbing his back in a cool cloth and music, everything I could to soothe. And the morphine and Ativan was not even touching it. So what else is terminal agitation if it's not a physical distress? It's often an existential distress. It's often the process of us letting go. This is what I have witnessed in these 35 years, that some that have prepared for their death. What do I mean by prepared for death? I mean someone that has taken the time throughout their life or in a period of their life to reconcile that which needs to be reconciled, has forgiven self and others, has come to terms with their finite life, has taken the time to say goodbye, has come to the part of life where they accept death and they accept how they lived. And for some of us, that's a very difficult process. Sometimes we don't get there, and that's okay. But the level of agitation sometimes is associated with things that are needing to be worked out. Now, I said a lot of conscious things that be worked out. Sometimes they're unconscious, meaning we're not aware of something that needs to be worked out, and we're just working through it. What I do believe is that it's more uncomfortable for us to watch it than the person that's experiencing it. Often at that time of the dying process, we've left wakeful consciousness. So it's another aspect of our consciousness working through. I hope that's helpful. But I have witnessed once somebody moves through that, it's part of our work. It's part of our work in our life. Some of us, and I imagine you can take a peek at your life, I imagine some of us have had these times in our life where we're working through existential crises. What does life mean? I think we've all been through an existential crisis this last year and a half with COVID. The life we once knew was gone. How did you reconcile that? How did you find a new way, a new path? It took a lot of work, probably. It took some struggle, maybe some tears, some frustrations, some scary times. I think it had everything in it. But it was a struggle. When the rug gets pulled out beneath us and we have to discover, well, who am I now that I can't go meet with my friends or go out to dinner or travel or seeing clients for a while? I wasn't able to see clients for a while except on Zoom, which I was very, very grateful for. Who am I now? We have these touchstones that we rely on that help us mirror who we are. What happens when those are gone? We have to dig deep and create a new stream for ourselves to swim up, a new concept of ourselves. In that is the alchemy of transformation. It is in the suffering where we transcend. It is in the suffering where we grow and learn. Yeah? Think about those times in your life where you may have had a trauma or a tragedy, and can't imagine how hard it was. Even this last year and a half, if that feels right, to explore. It was difficult. Now that we're on the other side of it, or you're on the other side of this, what did you learn from it? How has it contributed to your life? There is an expression, it was the best, worst time of my life. I can remember those. And I also wouldn't trade it because it's built who I am. So terminal agitation often is more work to be worked through. But it absolutely shows up for us watching it as suffering and as painful, and it's very hard to watch. There's lots of tools to support someone, but they have to go through their process. It's their journey. I see our job as loving them through, holding their hand, putting the cool cloth on their head, letting them know they're loved, letting them know they're going to be okay. And when they work through that, the other side's amazing. My loved one, mom, died last year, and she had a real hard existential crisis, terminal agitation. And I was with her and up with her for those, 30-something hours. I didn't count because I was getting delirious. And she was moaning and up and down, and we did a lot of drugs to try and support her because I knew that's what she would want, but it didn't seem to touch it. I sang to her, I told her stories, I held her, I laid in bed with her, I did what I could. She worked through it, and she had one of the most peaceful deaths that I experienced. And it was like a whisper at the end of her life. There was few people around her, loved ones around her, and I had to really, really look and feel that she died because I couldn't see the last breath. It was just like a whisper. And she ended up with a sweet little smile on her face. Brought me a lot of peace knowing that I think she worked through what she needed to. And I knew her very well, and she was afraid of death, and she didn't work on her connection to death till the very last week. And she said to me, I don't know how to do this. When we finally knew she had finally was ready to go on hospice and come home. She says, I don't know how to do this. And I held her hand and it said, I don't know how you can know. We only do this once. But you've got this. Well, what do I do when I get home? We go home and we live. What would you like to do when you get home? And she shared the different things that she'd like to do. So that's a little bit about terminal agitation. I hope that helps, Sarah. And I do know, because we had several beautiful conversations, that you were there for your grandma. And my imagination is she was working through what she needed to. But I want to remind you that it's a physical process and an existential process that we go through at the end of life. I believe we all go through it, but we experience it differently. And something that I particularly honor and want to love through. I hope that was helpful. Let me head down and see what else is moving through you. If you have any comments on what I shared, please feel free for sharing, to share more. Oh, Susan, you're welcome, Susan. I think part of my fear came from the deaths of 2 close relatives within 5 months of the other. I get that. It's hard. I had 2 loved ones die within 3 weeks of each other, my sister and my mom. And it takes your breath away. It's a whole lot to process physically and emotionally, especially if you're the caregiver. And we witness things that we're not sure of. What is this? Just like terminal agitation. It's very scary to witness, especially if we have no foundation or understanding to work with. But getting the education like you're doing will help. And again, for me, the most important with our loved ones is absolutely loving them through. Having the conversations early on to know what their wishes are. And so many of my loved ones want wanted different things. My former husband that died didn't want to be present, and he wanted a lot of medication. So I was able to give him the medication. And I have others that don't want any medication at all, as long as they can, so they can be aware and conscious and connected. There is in my heart no good death, no bad death. Death is death. But we do get some options in it. Some things are way out of our control. But we can set ourselves up to be loved through. And I encourage you to continue to have those conversations and reach out for loved ones. Reach out for those in the field to help and support you as well. Join educational programs. And there's always a place inside of you that's going to be okay. We just have to find them. We have to find that connection to the place that is okay. That place, that still quiet place that feels peace. And it's so hard to do sometimes. I really get that. But you can do it. And let us know how we can support you. Good. Yeah. And Jim says, both women I mentioned are happiest with after the plague is passing, in-person visits. Me too. Isn't it wonderful we can start being together? It's so lovely. And that's a great example of what I'm expressing a little bit. Don't we cherish it even more? I'll see a friend, make sure it's okay, and get a hug. And oh, it's so yummy. That's an example of how death inspires life, how it helps us crystallize the things that bring the greatest meaning, help us get out of taking things for granted. This life is short. It's very, very short. So we can learn and grow into that crystallized appreciation and awe. What looks special or magical to you now that we're coming out of our restrictions? What have you just cherished? For me, it's absolutely being with my clients and hugs. You know, Zoom has been awesome. I'm so grateful for it. And it's a different experience. It's a different experience. Yes, Jim, it's a journey. It is a journey. And I asked you, does the journey end when this life ends? What do you think? I'm going to grab a little sip here. Does the journey end? Or do we keep journeying? Sarah, you're more than welcome. And thank you for bringing your grandma into the circle of love. And my heart is with you as you say goodbye to your cherished grandma and grieve her loss. Grieve your loss. And that brings me at least thinking about grief and how important it is to our healing. It's a little hard sometimes. We're not too supported to grieve. You're not over that yet? It's been a year. Grief is something we don't get over. It changes faces. It changes facets. But it's something that's with us. Grief is another facet of love. If you love, you grieve. Now there's ways to find our wellness through grief, and you can find tools and support for that, which is beautiful. But sometimes it absolutely just takes your breath away. But in that space, we transform. We can learn how to love deeper. We can learn to cherish what we have more because we absolutely know it's going to dissolve. Everything we have will dissolve. That makes it more precious on the route. Kathy, thank you for sharing. I don't think it ends. I've had some incredible connections with my mother who died when I was 19. It's been 37 years. Lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I also have some lovely connections with loved ones I've died and even clients. And it helps affirm to me There's something beyond. But it also helps me realize that they live on within me. They live on within my heart. And that helps me stay connected. And I'll share with you some of the things that I do to stay connected. One of the things I have, and I so recommend it if you have a space to do this, I have an ancestor altar in my room. And on the ancestor altar, I have some of my loved ones' ashes, even my four-legged loves, a photo, something of theirs. I always put flowers on the altar, and I just create this sacred space for them. So I pass this altar several times during the day. And I get a chance to connect with them and feel them. I often will meditate in front of my ancestor altar. And yes, I talk to them. I ask them questions. And sometimes they answer, no, not so much out loud, but I hear them or I feel them. It's the greatest feeling in the world. It helps narrow the separation, the degrees of separation. I had a beautiful client say to me this once, and I've never forgotten it because it's been incredibly helpful. She told me, yeah, my husband died, but our relationship didn't die. I just have a new relationship with him. And I thought that was exquisite, especially as I thought about it even more. And it's true. We have a new relationship with those that have died. Yes, it's not in the physical world, but what world is it in? Is it in our heart? For me, yes. Is it in our soul? Yes, for me too. And is it energy as we experience, as we exchange energy? Absolutely, it's not the same, but it's something new that gets born, a new form of connection. For some, even share a deeper form of connection, a unique one, sometimes a freer one. There are many, many ways of finding that connection. What are some of the ways that you connect with your loved ones that have died? How do they show up? I love when they come in my dream. I call that a visitation. And I pay close attention because they have my back. I feel they're helping me see things I'm not ready to see yet or that I can't see. Yes, Jim writes, some people, when their partner dies, their relationship improves. And this is absolutely true. Good, bad, who's to say? Absolutely not right or wrong. Just fascinating that we can build a new relationship with someone that has died. What does that say? What does that tell us? It also inspires me to question and challenge my relationship with the living too. How do I connect with them? What aspects do I connect with them? And how will that be the same or different when they die? It's in a very, very interesting contemplation. It also inspires something that came up in the Death Cafe on yesterday. I had I do a Zoom Death Cafe. And the conversation, it was brought up earlier today about someone that's declining or someone that has dementia or Alzheimer's, how they feel a strong death or loss because they can't connect with that person in the same place. And that's absolutely something that needs to be grieved because it's not the same relationship. People say, well, it's not my mom. It is absolutely your mom. But your mom now has a different access to who she is. Well, what I do in situations like that is I grieve the loss. I shared yesterday that I write a love letter. I say a goodbye letter to this person or this essence or this being that I knew. What I'm sad to not be connected with, what I'm going to miss about them, and how hard it is for me to find connection. But it's a grieving, it's a burial, it's an ending. So that aspect probably won't come back. And we miss that. We miss that place. And then once I go through that process for myself, I write a welcome letter. These are all love letters in my terms. I welcome this new mom, dad, friend, aunt, uncle, loved one, associate. I welcome them into life. And I start to see them for who they are. What aspect of them do I love? Sometimes it's a new innocence. Or sometimes there's a personality change, and sometimes it's gentler. Sometimes it's harsher. But I connect with what is in front of me, and I start to build a new relationship. It's absolutely a transformational process. I had one son and daughter-in-law who had a mom that had Alzheimer's. She called 30, 40, 50 times a day. She was in a beautiful care home. And I worked with her for about 2.5 years. And once the son was having such a difficult process, he didn't have a good relationship with his mom before and had a lot of hurt and wounds from their relationship. And once we said goodbye to that aspect of his mom, because she wasn't that person now, but that was projection carried forward to their relationship and was making it so difficult in the present time. He was an amazing son and made sure she had total care and love. I saw her twice a week. But he had so much angst and it was exhausting. So once he wrote this letter saying goodbye and airing any of the leftover emotions that needed to be expressed and released, anything that bubbled up. And then he wrote her a welcome letter and started to connect with who she was. And she was gentler for him. And that was a beautiful thing. And she wasn't harsh or critical. And that was a lot of relief for him. He saw her with compassionate eyes because she was helpless and needed his care. And they connected at the vulnerable place. And he could care for her in a way that helped him heal his wound of not being cared for. It was absolutely beautiful, a beautiful healing. So we often don't want to see loved ones that are declining because we want to remember them the way they were. We want to remember them. But then we're only remembering part of someone. This is all part of who we are. Yeah, it'd be nice only you remember the good and the sweet. But that's really impossible because our lives are complex. We have happy, we have sadness, we have angst, we have trauma, we have anger, we have frustration, we have joy, we have bliss. We can't have one without the other. Parents will say, well, I'm worried about letting my children see their grandpa when they're dying. I absolutely encourage it with love and compassion and hand-holding. It helps our children see this is part of life and it's okay. And yes, you too are going to walk there. We can't protect our children from death, can we? We just can't. So why not hold their hand in a loving, embracive environment and help them see death? Children aren't fearful of death until they feel our fear. So we have that opportunity to walk them home. As Ram Dass says, we're walking each other home. And we are. And we are. But the more we keep removing ourselves from decline, from death, from grief, from disease, from aging, anti-aging, the more scary it gets. Can you see that? The more we touch it and brush it and acknowledge it and give it voice, the more we recognize this is part of this finite life. And then you get to start to formulate choices. Wow, how do I want to face my death? How do I want to love somebody through? We have that opportunity. And again, I think that's one of the beauties of Death Cafe, is to have a forum to have these conversations. And I want to say one thing, there's so much information out there right now. There's no right way to do it. Your way is the right way, the best way. But you got to dig deep. You got to find your heart. You got to find your heart print. You got to make choices that are aligned with your true nature, that are aligned with you. And that can be done. Reach out and find those resources that you feel supported, you feel heard, you feel compassion. And this may be an absolutely incredible experience. Yeah. And in the meantime, may this also inspire your life to seize the moment, embrace this life. The Heartway's tagline is embracing life through honoring death, or embracing life, honoring death. They're not mutually exclusive. If you're embracing your life, you're absolutely honoring death. If you're honoring death, you're absolutely embracing your life. Can you see that? They're not mutually exclusive. We think we can deny death, but can we? What happens when you bury all that inside of you? You know you have a pressure cooker. And when you put all these unattended to emotions and all these frustrations or angers or fears, that pressure cooker gets to be hot. And we know what happens to pressure cookers when they get too hot. Boom. They explode or they seep out, usually in places that we're really not intending it to. So tend your pressure cooker. Keep it cool. Observe all the particles and ingredients in there, because they're really grist for the mill. They're really jewels that inspire. They're really the many gifts of life that teach us how to live fuller, how to embrace this life, how to honor death, and make the most out of this finite life. I wish that for you. I wish that for you. And that's what I'm dedicated to be part of supporting you on that journey. Wow, another Death Cafe flies by. I see we have less than a minute. I just want to check in and I can go over a little bit. Is there anything you're dying to share? I want to make sure that you feel heard in anything you want to share before we close this evening. Sweet to see the thank yous. You are beyond welcome. Thank you all for being brave and being here. I hope it's been supportive. If you need any more additional information or resources, go ahead and find us on the Heartway, theheartway.org, and send a message out to us. And there's also incredible resources. We just launched a new 158-page website. And it took a lot, but I hope you find things that are helpful. Please take good care of yourself. And I want you to imagine yourself as a baby bird and treat yourself like a baby bird. I don't know what might move through you after tonight. Honor it, treat it gently. And in closing, I want to say to you, be safe, be love, be you. With love from my heart to yours. We'll see you next month, if not sooner.